operating system. So what are the topics that we are going to cover here in the CPU scheduling? That is the CPU scheduling, CPU schedulers, CPU scheduling and scheduling criteria, scheduling algorithms. In that we will discuss the FCFS, SJF, SJRT, priority based, round robin, multi-queue and multi-feedback queue scheduling algorithms. So let's begin now. So CPU scheduling, it refers to the set of policies and the mechanism supported by the operating system which controls the order in which the work to be done is completed. So in this way, CPU scheduling is the base for operating system for supporting the multi-programming concepts. So by having the number of programs in the computer memory at the same time, the CPU may be shared among them. The other resources also may be shared among the different processes. So this mechanism improves the overall efficiency of the computer system, and the more work can be completed in the lesser time. So if we see in the CPU scheduling, we have the different processes. Suppose see, this is a process P1, P2, P3 and so on. The process Pn may also be there, and we have the CPU as a resource, and this resource CPU will be utilized by these different processes. But in multi-programming environment, as we know, where in the random access memory, that is the main memory, so in the memory more than one program may reside simultaneously. So like P2, P3, P4, similarly others also. So in this case, what may happen, these processes may be competing for the chance, to be executed by the CPU. So process P1, P2, P3, all they are asking to this CPU so that they can complete their work. So now more than process, everybody is competing, so there must be some criteria, there must be some mechanism so that we can assign these processes to get the efficient utilization of the resources. So here scheduling helps in deciding which process should occupy a resource. In that we have the CPU resources, memory, input output devices, etc. So this is the job of the scheduling. And if we specifically go for CPU scheduling, so how the CPU is assigned to the processes, this will be discussed here. So in the CPU scheduler, what happens, when CPU becomes idle, the operating system must select one of the process in the ready queue to be executed, and here the CPU scheduler is a module, or it is a program of the operating system that chooses a process from the processes available in the main memory that are ready to execute, and allocate the CPU to one of them. So the ready queue is there. So as we know, we have the different process state. We have the new state, after that we have the ready state, and we have the running state, where the running state means the process is executing, and after that from ready to running and running to ready, the process can move, and if the process is completed, then it will go to the terminated state. And if some input output is required, some event interrupt had happened, then it go to the ready state in cases that we call the waiting state. So what happens in the ready queue, we have the ready queue job. In this queue the process may be waiting. So the CPU scheduler selects a process from the processes in memory that are ready to execute from the ready queue and allocate the CPU to one of them. So this is job. So suppose this process is P1 is there. The CPU scheduler will pick this process and it will assign to this processor so that it can go to the running step to complete its task. So in this way we can do this assignment. And next one is the operating system code that implements the CPU scheduling algorithm is known as a CPU scheduler. And now the question comes, when this CPU scheduling decision has to be done, has to make. So first is the when process switches from running to waiting state. So from the running to waiting state, if that process moves, at that time we need to make the scheduling, CPU scheduling for the process. Next one is the when process terminates. After terminating the process, we leave the space. It will release the CPU and memory also. And then we have to pick up another process so that the process can proceed. It can hold the control of the CPU. Next one is the switching from the running to ready state. So in that, from running to ready state, some event has occurred, interrupt had happened, and the process has moved from running to ready state. So in this case, what will happen? So this is the running state. So in that case, we have to move from we have to do the scheduling work. Suppose in case of we'll see later the round robin process, the CPU scheduling, in that when the one process time slice or time quantum has over, then after that time quantum has passed, another process will get the chance. So in that case also the process needs the switching. And fourth one is the switches, when the process switches from waiting to ready states in case of the IO or input output device operation completions. Then in this case also this decision has to be done. And next, the on arrival of the new processes, when the long-term scheduler brings the process, the process came into the memory. At that time the decision is also made for the scheduling of the process. So now the thing is, what is the scheduler? So in this way, scheduler, as we know, it is a program module that selects the next job to be admitted for the execution. So in this way we have the three types of schedulers, and their role differs from each other. Based on their roles, the name is there. So first one is the long-term scheduler, as we know, and this short-term scheduler, and third one is the medium-term schedulers. So what is the role of these long-term, short-term schedulers? We will check one by one. So in case of the short-term scheduler, first we will see the long-term scheduler, not short-term scheduler. So the long-term scheduler's job is to bring the new job to the memory. So from the job pools, it picks the process and brings the process into the main memory. So here job pool is there. The jobs are here pooled: job 1, job 2, job 3, or you may say this is the task that the processor has to do. So these jobs will be created here, and the long-term scheduler plays the role here. It picks the job here and it keeps into the brings the process into ready queue. So after the process has arrived into the ready queue, then further actions will be taken by the short-term scheduler. So that's why this long-term scheduler is also known as the job scheduler. So another name is there. This for is the job scheduler because it schedules the jobs. And this in the brief we write the LTS. So LTS, long term scheduler, determines which programs are admitted to the system for processing. Then it selects the processes from the queue and loads them into the memory for the execution. So this is the LTS. Next, the role of the short-term scheduler comes. So here the processes whatever has brought admitted here, so they will be waiting here in the ready queue. So we have the P1, P2, P3 and P4. These are the processes. They are waiting their chance for getting the control of the CPU. So at this time the CPU scheduling has to be done for assigning the CPU to the process. So it's the role of the CPU scheduler that we call the short-term scheduler. This short-term schedulers picks any process, suppose P1, and it will assign this to the CPU, and here the execution will start, and that we call the running state of the process. So short-term schedulers behaves like that, and we also call it as a CPU schedulers. And next the thing is here the medium term scheduler. So MTS rules comes when some process is executing and it has partially executed, and that process has now in a waiting state. We have kept into the some space we call the swap space, and when the next time the process we have to start, for that the medium term scheduler plays the role. So it will initiate all the waiting processes. We have whatever processes we have swapped out during the executions. So medium term scheduler, it will pick the process and it will keep there in the ready queue again. So there is a location that ready queue, or in the process state diagram we have the ready state. So from the ready state only any process can go into the then can get the hold of the CPU so that they can do their executions. So this is the role of the three schedulers. And medium term scheduler we can see once again. So what happens in the medium term schedulers, a running process may become suspended if it makes input output request, and a suspended process cannot make any progress towards the completion. So in such situations, such cases, to remove the process from the memory and make the space for other processes, the suspended processes, whatever the process was suspended now, so that suspended process is moved to the secondary storage, and this is called the swapping. This is called the swapping. So swapping means here the whatever the process was running, and in case of input output is there unnecessary, they are in the memory. So for that medium term scheduler will swap out it into the one queue. Is that we can say it is a swapping queue or swapped out queue, swapping queue. So in this location the MTS will take the process and it will keep into this swapping queue. So here the process will be kept. So this task, as we know, will be handled by only the MTS. So the jobs are now distributed among these schedulers while the working. So processes are there, then the swapped out process can be swapped into the ready queue. Again here the STS, that we call the short-term scheduler, will play the role here, and like this the process is completed. So if we see the differences among the LTS, MTS and the STS, that is the short-term scheduler. So these differences are like that. For long-term scheduler, it is also known as the job schedulers, and the short-term scheduler is another name is the CPU scheduler. And here the medium scheduler we have, then it is called the swapping scheduler because it plays the role of the swapping as we have seen in the previous slide. So the next point is that it takes processes from the job pool, and here short-term scheduler always picks the process from the ready queue, and medium-term scheduler takes the process from the running, waiting or dead states. So the third point is the speed of the long-term scheduler is the slowest among all two others, and the short-term scheduler is the very fast because it is very near to the CPU, and the program we have seen also here. So it is CPU the plays the role of the STS. The short-term scheduler comes here, so it is very near to the CPU, so that's why it works very fast. Next, the MTS speed is between the LTS and the MTS. So next point is here the LTS, that is the long-term schedulers. It controls the degree of multi-programming. Degree of multi-programming means in multi-programming the more than one programs resides into the memory. So that is handled by the long-term schedulers. So because one process has arrived in the program or it has brought there, so the degree of multi-programming will increase. So it is the control, it has long-term scheduler has the control over it. Next point is the short-term scheduler, it has lesser control over the degree of multi-programming because the STS will play the role when the process has arrived, then it will in the ready queue it will pick and it will hand over the CPU to that process only. And degree of multi-programming also can be reduced by the medium-term schedulers because the swapped out processes, whatever process was there, it was swapped out in the secondary storage for the temporarily. So this also helps in reducing the degree of multi-programming. So this is the difference between these three types of schedulers. Now coming to the next topic, that is the preemptive versus non-preemptive scheduling. So the preemptive scheduling is that means whenever process, suppose P, the process P0 process is there, it is executing and it has the control of the CPU. So if this process can leave the CPU in between without completing the task temporarily, then we can say it is a preemptive scheduling algorithm. So the currently running process may be interrupted by any other process and moved to the ready state by the operating system forcefully. So this is called the preemptive. And in case of round robin scheduling algorithm, the generally it happens. So in non-preemptive scheduling algorithm means whenever if the process now having the control of the CPU and it's executing its task here, so what will happen, the process will not leave the CPU until its completion. So processor will be released only the process has completed the task. So in this type of scheduling is called the non-preemptive scheduling. So next one is the dispatcher. So dispatcher is also a small program, so that dispatcher plays the role, very important role in the CPU scheduling. So what it does, the OS code that takes the CPU away from the current process and hand it over to the newly scheduled process, and it is known as the dispatcher. So dispatcher gives control of the CPU to the process selected by the short-term scheduler, and dispatcher performs switching context. Context switching means process P1 and P2 is there. If the control of the process CPU is moving, so for that the context switching happens. The CPU now it is holding, after that this will be P2 will hold. So for that what will happen, this type of task can be done. So switching to the user mode, jumping to the proper location in the program to restart that program, we perform this task by the dispatcher. And here what happens, if dispatching, because it is extra overhead that is caused in the operating system, so that we have the term the dispatch latency. So it is the time dispatch latency, the time it takes for dispatcher to stop one process and start executing another is called the dispatch latency. So now the questions comes to the scheduling criteria. So what are the measures or criteria that we will use for the scheduling of the processes? So you can see here, first one is the CPU utilization. So what is our objective here for getting the performance in the system? First one is the CPU utilization. So what is the objective? Our objective is we will keep the CPU as busy as possible. CPU utilization, and this can be measured in percentage. So we can make the CPU busy from between 0% to the 100%. So if 50% the system is busy, then we can say the utilization is 50%, like that. So how we can calculate this processor utilization? So processor utilization can be calculated as, we can use this formula for that. What is that? So processor busy time, we can use this formula, processor busy time, and means how long the processor was busy for that period of time, and processor busy time plus processor idle time. So with this formula we can, and if we multiply it by 100, then we can get the processor utilization into the percentage. So suppose my processor is executed and it has executed up to the 5 seconds. Out of that 5 seconds it has executed plus 5 seconds it was idle. So total it will come 5 by 10. So 1 by 2, that will be the 50.5, or if we measure in the percentage, then we can say that my processor or CPU are busy how much? 50%. So in this way the CPU utilization we can track. So this is one criteria, and the next one is the throughput. So throughput is defined as the amount of work done. So total amount of work done means, here we can calculate like this, the number of processes that complete their executions per unit time. So this is the one formula that we use for this purpose, and we can, like this, we calculate. If we see the formula, if you want to calculate this one, so throughput we can calculate by the number of processes completed and divided by the time unit. So we can This means number of processes those who have completed the task number of processes completed divided by the time, and in that per unit time. So suppose 10 processes has completed in 1 second. So we can say the throughput is 10 process per unit time. Next one is the waiting time. So waiting time is the amount of time a process has been waiting in the ready queue. Because in primitive scheduling algorithms, what happens, the process has to leave the resource before its completion, so and they will be waiting in the ready queue. So those times that the process is spent in the ready queue will calculate, and we find out the waiting time for the process. So we can say for non-primitive process algorithms, we can calculate this by the start time and the arrival time. So this difference will be giving the waiting time. And for primitive algorithms, this will the finish time and the arrival time, and burst time means that is the execution time. So how long the process has executed plus arrival time and finish time. By this we can get the waiting time for the process. And next one is the okay, but one more thing here, waiting time. When we calculate in the waiting time, generally we calculate the average waiting time. So average waiting time we calculate in case of this for measuring the waiting time, we will calculate the average time. So how? So total waiting time, whatever the total waiting time we have calculated, and we will divide by the number of processes. So we will get the average waiting time. Next it comes to the turnaround time. So turnaround time, it is the amount of time to execute a particular process, the time it has taken. So we can calculate this. It is the arrival time and the finish time, or the process when it has been submitted to the system and when it has finished the work. Then this duration is calculated, and this is nothing but the turnaround time. So in other way we can say that it is the time interval between the submission of the process and the completion of the process. So in various ways this can be defined. So if I have submitted the process, and we can say it is the arrival time. Its arrival time is suppose 5. Okay, and it has executed and it has completed or finished its task. Okay, it finished this task at the 20th second. 5th second the process has came, and 20th second it has completed. So the total turnaround time will be 20 minus 5, and that is the 15. If it is a microsecond, if I say it is in microsecond, then this microsecond, 15 microsecond is the time duration. So this one is the okay. Next one is the response time. So in the response time we calculate the amount of time that it takes from when a request was submitted to the system and when the first response has arrived. So that is called the response time, and it's not the output. So for time sharing system, it is the response time is very important. So what happens, we can see in this environment, we have submitted some job to the system. Suppose we have J1, J2, J3, whatever you have given, and the output has started coming. So what happened? When we got the first, suppose the fifth second we have given, and I got the first response from the out of the system, then I will say that 6 minus 5, that is the first one. Okay, if we are measuring in the microsecond, I will say that 1 microsecond is the response time of the system. So in this way we can calculate the response time of the system. So if we see in the form of formula also, we can define the formula. So response time, we can say this is the time, and we will say write the first response minus T, that is the submission of the request. So submission of request. So T stands for time. So this difference in of the time will give the response time. Okay, so these are the 5 criteria that we use for comparison. Next one is the optimization. So what is our objective of this? What we will get out of these 5 parameters? So our objective here in this to maximize the CPU utilization. So CPU utilization, I told, from 0 to 100% it varies. So our objective is to achieve the 100% CPU utilization, so that we can get the more work done by the system in the lesser time. And throughput, that is the number of processes completing per unit time. So these 2 parameters, what we have to do, we have to increase, we have to maximize it, per unit time. And the other 3 parameters that are there, that is the turnaround time, minimum waiting time, and the response time. So for this we have to minimize these things, then we will get the efficient system. So we have to minimize this one, and CPU utilization and throughput we have to maximize. So now coming to the CPU scheduling algorithms that we use. So here we have in the batch processing system, batch systems, the first algorithm is called the first come first serve. So with this first come first serve means we will use this CPU scheduling algorithm for scheduling the jobs. Next is the shortest job first. In the interactive way, we have other methods like round robin priority scheduling, multi-queue and multi-level feedback queue scheduling algorithm. So coming to the first come first serve scheduling algorithm. So first one is this, it is the simplest CPU algorithm among all available. So next it is the non-preemptive. Non-preemptive means once the process has been assigned some the processor for the to complete the task by it, so it will not leave until its completion. Okay, so and that's why it is called the non-preemptive. So the process that requires the CPU first is allocated the CPU first come first serve. And here for implementation purpose we use the FIFO queue. FIFO means first in first out queue. We use for that when a process enters the ready queue, its PCB is generally linked onto the tail of the queue. When the CPU is free, it is allocated to the process at the head of the queue. And next, what is the limitations of the CPU, these first come FCFS methods? So FCFS favor the long processes as compared to the short. So because of this, convoy effect happens. And what is the other limitation? That is, average waiting time is often quite long in this FCFS algorithm. Why? Because uh, it is a non-preemptive algorithm. So if long processes first had taken the control of the CPU, so it will continue to work, and the smaller processes may be waiting for a long time. And FCFS is non-preemptive, so it is struggle for some for time sharing systems, because in time sharing system the control has to be left. So what is the convoy effect? That is, we can say this is the long processes. So short process, you can say here like this, they are waiting this to go so that they can pass. So because of this, that is called the convoy effect. So here when a setup process need to use a resource for short time, and one process holds the resource for a long time, blocking all other processes. So this causes poor utilization of the other resources in the system. So if we go for the numerical, some exercise we can see here. So we can look here, the process is there, three process P1, P2, P3 is there, and we have the burst time 24, 3 and 3. This is the burst time or execution time. So P1 will execute maximum 24 if we are using the time unit as a microsecond. So this will execute for 24 microsecond, 3 microsecond and 3 microseconds. Okay. And if we see that the process arrive into the system in the order like P1, P2 and P3, then we can calculate the other parameters like CPU turnaround time, average waiting time, CPU utilization, response time, everything we can calculate here. So if you look here, the process here came into the order of P1, P2, P3. So for that, what we have to do, for calculation of all these things, we use the Gantt chart. So in Gantt chart, what we represent, we draw this Gantt chart with respect to the time. So you can say in x-axis we have the time, in this x-axis we have the time, and here the process are there. So corresponding process, how much they have executed, the same thing we are calculating here. So let's see here how this calculation has done. So process P1, if we write here for P1, P2, P3, and for these processes, so we have the burst time, that is the 24, 3 and 3. So what will happen in this, the P1 will execute, because it is a FCFS rule. As per the FCFS, P1 first it will complete its execution, so arrival time it is 0, then from this it has started and it will complete its task by completely executing for 24 microseconds. After that the P2 will start. So from 24th onwards it has executed for 3 microseconds. So it has been now 27, and P3 then will get the chance and it has executed for 3 seconds. So it came up to the 30 microseconds. So like this it has executed for 24, 3, 3, 3. Now what is the way how to calculate the waiting times? So waiting times can be calculated by here, by what is the arrival time and the start time. So we can see here for P1, as the process has arrived, immediately has started. So for that the waiting time is 0. For P2 the waiting time is 24. Why? Because P2 was waiting up to this time. When at the 24th microsecond that P1 has completed its task, its work, then P2 has started execution. So during this duration it was waiting, the process P2 was waiting. So that's why the waiting time for it is the 24. So for P3 process, because the process, all the process arrived in the order P1, P2, P2, P1, P2, P3, but the arrival time, if we are considering the 0, then this P3 was also waiting for P3 waited for P1 to complete, then P2 to complete. So 24 and plus 3 we got the 27. And as we know in the average waiting time, so how many number of process, 1 2 3 process are there. So we will calculate this 24 and 20 24 and plus 20 3 process, then you will get the 17. So 17 microsecond is the average waiting time for the processes. So in this way we compute this one in the FCFS. So next, suppose the process arrive in the order of P2, P3 and P1. So now we have changed the order of arrival. So what will happen? P2 came first, so we will give the chance to P2 for execute. So it will execute for 3 microseconds. We have given the chance P3 to for 3 seconds as per its requirement. So and then P1 has started the task. Then what will happen? The average time has now reduced. For it, it is waiting time for P2 is here 0, and for P3 it is the P3 for it is 3, and for P2, because up to this when the work is completed it has taken 6 microseconds, then P1 has started. So for this it is 6. So 6 plus 3. So we are getting here 9, and divided by 3 number process, then we are getting 3. So it means that order has the effect over the FCFS algorithm. So another example is also there, same thing we can understood here. So we have the P1, P2, P3, burst time is 24 second, 3, 4, and order of arrival is the 1, 2, 3, and the process arrival time is 0, 3 and 4. Okay. So as per the FCFS rule, P1 has came first, so it will execute for 24 seconds. Then P2 has arrived, and the P2 has to execute for 3 seconds, so it has executed for 3 seconds. Time has been now 27, and P3 has executed for the 4 seconds. Then we have computed the average waiting time for P1, P2 and P3. We got here we are getting the 21, and we are getting here the 23. We are adding these all, then we are getting the 14.667 the waiting time. So like this we calculate the waiting time. We can also calculate the turnaround time and the CPU utilization and all other parameters also, but generally the turnaround time and the average waiting time is generally calculated. So we can see here another example is here, process arrival time and burst time. So this can also be computed in the same way as an exercise. So this can be taken as an exercise. Next one is the next scheduling algorithm is the SJF, that we call the shortest job first, and next one is shortest remaining time first scheduling algorithm. So what will happen here, which process in this mechanism, which process is having the shortest burst time, we will give the priority to those processes, and which one is having the long execution time, we will give the chance later. So in this way this mechanism is implemented, and if the two processes have the same length next CPU burst, then obviously we will go for the FCFS, that is the arrival. If tie happens, then we will, for breaking the tie, we will go for the FCFS. So it comes in two varieties. So it's SJF non-preemptive and shortest remaining time first. This is the preemptive, because every time the this will be checked that which process is shortest. If some process is executing and after that what happened, new process came, or any process which is having the shortest remaining time, then that execution will start. So in this we call it is a optimal This is thought to be optimal over the FCFS, and it gives the minimum average time for the given set of processes. So moving a short processes before a long one decreases the waiting time of the short process more than it increases the waiting time of the long processes. Consequently, the average waiting time decreases. So but the difficulty, some difficulty is also there. So the real difficulty with the shortest job algorithm is knowing the length of the next CPU burst. Okay, so if we see the numerical, we can understood that we have the P1, P2, P3, 4 processes. Burst time is 6, 8, 7, 3, and order of arrival is 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they have arrived at the 0 seconds. So we can see here for P1, as per the shortest job, we will pick here which one is the shortest. So this one is. So P3 will execute first. P4 will execute first for 3 seconds, then the chance will be given to the P1. P1 will complete its task. After that, P3 is the third shortest. It will execute for 7 microseconds. Then here the P4 will get the P2 will get the chance to execute further, because it is the longest among all. So in this way we execute the process, and we can get these waiting times 0, 3, 9 and 16, and we can get the average waiting time by making the addition of these. So total running time is 24, and the average waiting time is 3 plus 9 plus 16 divided by 4 is coming that 7 time units. It is a microsecond and 7 microseconds. Next, coming to the SRTF, so shortest remaining time first. So if we take the two examples only, P1 and P2, we can say that for burst time is 10 microsecond for this one, and for P2 is 2 microseconds. So order of arrival is 1, 2, and the arrival time is 0 and second the 2. So in the beginning, at the 0th time, there was no process, so P1 has started its execution. So it has completed execution up to 2 microseconds. Then what had happened? P2 has arrived. So when the P2 has arrived, then the comparison will be done here. So what had happened? Out of P1 has now completed for 2 seconds, so remaining is 8 microseconds. So here 8 microsecond is the remaining time, burst time, and for P2, if you see here, the remaining time is 2 microseconds only. So which one is the shortest? This one. So the remaining time shortest is for the P2. So now the control will go to the P2, and P2 will start its execution. It has completed now its execution for 2 seconds. Then the control will go to the P1 again, and it will complete its task, and this time the task will be completed. So now this here we can calculate P2, the 4 minus 2, that is the waiting time for P1 is 2, and P2 for that, as it was shortest, immediately it get the chance and it started execution. So waiting time for it was a 0. So 2 by 2, and we will see here 1 microsecond is the waiting time for this one. So like this we can calculate this shortest remaining time first. So we also shortest job remaining time first, we can say another name we sometimes pronunciate. So we can see here the same example we have executed in this way. So preemptive SJF is there. So here we have the 4 processes. Arrival time is 0, 1, 2, 3, and burst time is this much. So because in the beginning there was no process, so it will start, and the P1 has started for 1 second. So after 1 second the P2 has came. When the P2 has came, its burst time is only 4, and for this it is a 7, because 1 completed. So now 7 microsecond is left, and new process which has arrived here, it is having the 4 microseconds. So it is the shortest, so the P2 will get the chance. The P2 will execute for 5 seconds, and after that at the 5th second another process has arrived, that is the P3. Now we will compare again, it having the time 7 and P1 which has completed for 1 second is still 7 microsecond is there. So 5 microsecond is we can say it is the lesser than the 7 microseconds. So who will get the chance? The process, now this newly arrived process P4, we will say this will get the chance. So now P1, P2, P4, like this the execution will be done and after that what we are going to do, we will calculate the average time 10 minus 1, 1 minus 1, 17 minus 2 and 5 minus 3, and we will divide by the number of processes. Total it's calculates to 24 by 26 by 4, then we will getting the 6.5 milliseconds of the average waiting time. So in this way scheduling can be done in SJRT. Next scheduling algorithm is the priority based scheduling algorithm. So in this way what is there, we set the priority, we give the priority, we associate the priority to each process, and based on priority they get the chance for the execution in the processor. So each process is assigned a priority here. Process with highest priority is to be executed first and so on like that. So processes with the same priority are executed on the first come first serve basis, and the priority are generally indicated in some fixed range numbers. We can see like 0 to 7 0 to 4 0 9 5 like this. So this we use the range of numbers for assigning the priority. So let's go to the example, then we'll understood better. So in this example, in the priority scheduling algorithm, we can say we have the 5 processes here. From P1 to P5 we have 5 processes and their burst time is 10 microseconds, 1, 2, 1 and 5, and their priority is given like this. So here the priority number what we give, we are following the convention that lesser the number higher the priority. So here for P1 10 microsecond is the burst time, P2 is 1. So among all whose priority is highest, the priority for P2 is the highest, and next is the second is the P5 and subsequently. So we can see here, so who will get the chance for execution first? So P2 will get the chance here. Now P2 will get the chance for execution, so it will execute for how long? 1 second. So after that second priority goes to P5. So P5 will start executions, and at the third place the priority goes to the P1. So P1 will execute for 10 seconds, then P3 and P4 and so on. So in this way the calculation is done, and we can calculate the average waiting time for all the processes for P2, P5, P1, and this calculates to the 8.2 milliseconds. So this is called the priority based scheduling algorithm. So in the previous algorithm, when we were handling the SJF, some problem was there. So that here we have the some disadvantage was also there. Now in this priority algorithms, we can see if we clearly watch the, if we clearly pay attention to the SJF in shortage of us, they are also in explicit, not explicitly but implicitly the priority is also there, because in the JRT or SRTF what we were doing, we were giving the chance to the process which was shortest. So this is also a kind of priority assignments. So we did this work there also. So next one is, if we go to the next one, how we calculate. Now the questions comes, how to set the priority. So in the SJF we have seen that indirectly the priority is also there. So we can look here. The priority can be defined either externally or externally. So internally, how it is defined? So here we use some measurable quantities to compute the priority of a process. For example, if P1 we are going to give the priority for this something, so we will take in the consideration of how much, what is the time limit for this, means how long it will execute, what are the memory requirement, means how much memory it will use for that memory resource, then how many number of files it will take at the time of execution, and now ratio of the average input output burst to the average CPU burst. So this thing we use for setting the priority. Next one is the external priority. So in the external priority, you can set the priority by yourself. Externally means users can set the priority here. So here the type of amount of funds being paid for the computer use department, sponsoring the work, other often political. So based on that we set the priority of the process and we get the chance. Next, what is the problem in this priority scheduling? Definitely there is some problem also here, like SJF. So in this what will happen, the major problem is here, the lower priority process may be waiting indefinitely and they may not be getting the chance. Means high priority process will keep on taking the control of the processor and they are executing, and which is having the low priority poor process, they will be waiting for a long time and they may also not get the chance for a long time. That we call, this term is also known as the starvation or indefinite waiting. So a process that is ready to run but waiting for the CPU can be considered as the blocked processes. And what happens, a priority scheduling algorithm can leave some low priority process waiting indefinitely. And so in a heavily loaded system where more number of processes are running there, so a steady stream of higher priority processes can prevent low priority process from ever getting the CPU. So what will happen is, because of that, the low priority process will be waiting for a long time, so that process cannot be work cannot be completed for long time. So what is the solution for this one? So the solution is in the increasing the priority, that we call the aging. So as the time is elapsed in the system, so for the low priority processes, their priority will be incremented by 1. So some mechanism is also there, but for sample purpose we will see here how it is done. So aging techniques we use here for the handling this situation of starvation. So gradually we increase the priority of the process that are waiting in the system for a long time. So like in our real life also we have the senior persons, so over the young persons the chances is given to the senior persons, they are respected more because of their aging. Okay, so next one is the how this is done. So priority we have seen that it ranges from 120 to 127 is the lowest and 0 is the highest, like that. So we could increase the priority of a waiting time process by 1 if for every 15 seconds. So we can set this time and we can say if this much time is not getting the chance, we'll increase the priority of the process by 1. Why? Because if new processes keep on coming to the system, entering new processes are coming and their priority is very high, so they will, low priority process will never get the chance. So for that issue, aging is a technique. For that, every 15 seconds 1 will be incremented in the priority, so that after some time it will get the chance. So it will take no more than 32 hours for a priority who having the 127 process to age to a priority of 0. In this way we can solve this problem. So next process, this scheduling algorithm is CPU scheduling algorithm is the round robin. It's also very nice algorithm. It is very useful in the interactive environment. So it generally comes in the category of the primitive process. Okay, so each process is provided a fixed time to execute, and this time is called the quantum, or we also call the time slice. So we call it is a time slice. Next one is the a quantum. Time quantum is generally ranges from 10 to 100 milliseconds. So this fixed amount of time, or this time slice, we can assign the process for the processor for the process, and after that the control will be taken by it, and it will be, the chance will be given for the another process for the same amount of time. So next step is, once a process executing for a given time period, it is printed after the process execute for a given time. After that, context here. So context switching is used to save the states of the primitive processes. So context switching is done, and during that we already know we have the PCB, that is the process control block. So in the process control block, suppose P1 is now executing, it will store its state in the PCB, and the control will go to the another process, suppose P1. Okay, it will execute, and after that it has completed the task, or the time slice of the P1 has ended. Now the control it will save its process state in the PCB, and then the control will go to the another process. Then one more round will be there. So like this, one in a circular work where the process will continue. So, and this is done by the context switching. So it is similar to that wall clock you had seen, like that. You have the 12, 6, 3 and 9. So here what will happen, like this we have. So what is happening, this one is sweeping here, so we can treat this is the time of the processes. So what will happen, suppose now this, it is pointing to 6. So after that, making one round, it will come here, and this type circular time, this in a round way the chances will be given to the processes. That's why we call it the round robin here. So what is the advantage? Advantage is that here the starvation problem that we have in the and the convoy effect in FCFS, starvation in the priority based scheduling algorithm, convoy in the FCFS. These two problems can be solved here. Okay, so because of each round robin cycle, every cycle is given a fixed time to execute. So in this way we can work, and this is suitable in the interactive environments. Okay, so what is the drawback also is here. So what is that? Because the more number of processes are there and you are using the round robin, in those cases, if the time slice is very less, we have assigned a time slice and not carefully, and that is very small. So what will happen? The process output will be reduced because of this low time slice or time quantum. The system will continue to work spending more time for the context switching, and context switching will be as a overhead to the system for poor performance of the, that will result the poor performance of the system, or it will degrade the performance of the system. So its performance heavily depends upon the time quantum. So we must have to carefully select the time quantum. So priority can't be set for the processes, because there is no priority, no point of priority here. Why? We are giving the equal chance to every processes. So in this way we can see the example. We have the 3 process P1 to P3, 24, 3 and 3 here we have, and we are taking the time slice as a 4. So we will give the chance for P1 for 24, then P2 has came, it will execute for 3 because it has completed for 1 microsecond earlier than P3. After that P1 will keep on getting the chance. So like that the process will completed, and we can calculate the average waiting time also. Like here P1 has started, here no waiting time, but after that and then P2 has arrived. So for P2 there is no waiting time here. For P3 the waiting time is there because for 3 seconds the P3 has P1 has executed for 4 seconds, then 3 seconds, then P3 has got the chance. So 4 plus 3. So now here P2 is having the 7 seconds of waiting. P2 has waited for 4 seconds here. Now after that what had happened for P1 is there. So during this duration, okay, so P1 has waited here. So we can see here P2 here 3. After that here what is that? How much? It is again for 7 3. So this much time and this much time it has taken into the waiting. So like this the 3 plus 3 means 6. So P1 has waited for 6 microseconds. So we can get here 17 here. 17 by 3, 5.66 is the average waiting for the P1, P2, P3 setup processes in the round robin scheduling algorithm. So next coming to the multi-queue. So in the multi-level queue, that is actually it is a mixed of the all the processes methods that we had seen here. So in multi queue scheduling algorithm, what will happen? A multiple queue is created. You can see here, and this queue is created based on some characteristic of the processes. Suppose system related process are there, we have made one group and we are using for this we are keeping in one queue, and we will apply some specific scheduling algorithm. Suppose this is an interactive process, interactive editing process, batch processes, student processes. So we had set the priority, so we kept the system process at the high. Interactive processes we kept at the second place. Like in suppose here we can assign for this queue whatever processes is related to the interactive group, we can all the process we can keep here, and we can use the round robin method like this. Okay, and we have the system process. So for system processes what we can do, we can use the priority based scheduling algorithm like this. So in this way all others the batch wise they can grouped, and we can assign the some specific scheduling algorithms to each queue based on the availability of memory size, process priority, and process type. Next, multi-queue. So the description is as follows for the different types of process, like system process. The system itself, operating system itself uses some processes that we call the system processes, which must be at a high priority. Interactive processes are there, okay, like basically an online game is there. So in that what we can do, sharing basis, sometime quantum it can be assigned to each and every process. So round robin is the good for that. Batch processes are there. Batch process means a group of tasks that can be completed sequentially. For that we can submit to the system. So what is that? This batch processing system we can group in that way in a one queue. Next is the student process. The system process always gives the high priority, while the student process is getting the low priority because they have the lower importance. So with this we have completed this CPU scheduling algorithms, and what is the CPU scheduler, and how the working of it's all the scheduling algorithm based on the numericals also.